So I'm Doug Andrew, and I'm a big proponent of universal life, but especially for indexed universal life. It didn't even come about until 1997. It was a no-brainer for me, and I began to employ indexed universal life over just regular fixed universal life from that point forward, and I tweaked my rates of return that were averaging 8.2% up until 1997 to 10.07% by using indexing. Now, let me warn you, there's a lot of financial advisors who do not understand what I'm about to teach you, and they think I'm talking about indexed mutual funds. No, indexing is a strategy. And so let me explain this as simply as I possibly can. And at the end of this episode, I'll show you how you can read my most recent book, The Laser Fund, that will explain this in detail. Let's simplify it. I've been talking in previous episodes that we put money into the insurance policy and we maximum fund it. We want to get the most money we could possibly put in there that the IRS will allow, with the least amount of insurance that they will let us get away with, and we want to put it in as fast as we can. So let's say I put in $100,000 a year for 5 years, and so I got in $500,000, and so that would be my basis or the guideline single premium, and that was $500,000. And let's say that I was earning 10%, which I have been earning the last 25 years, some years higher, some years lower, but the average has been 10.07. And so 500,000 earning 10%, double that in 7.2 years. So let's say it's now worth $1 million. So now I have $1 million of cash value inside my indexed universal life insurance policy. So let's take a snapshot in this moment that I have $1 million there. With indexed universal life, you have the ability, the flexibility, to be able to just hunker down and play it safe anytime you want and get the general account portfolio rate. If the insurance company, on all of their billions or even $1 trillion of assets, on their general account portfolio, let's say they're earning 6% and they need one of those percentage points for their overhead, and so the net is 5. Now, from 2000 to 2012, the general account portfolio rate was at least 5% or greater. So let's just use that because that was the worst decade since the Great Depression. So if I feel bearish about America, and I think we're going to head for a recession, I can just hunker down and take the general account portfolio rate of 5%. On my million, I would end up with $50,000. So that year, on my million, if I say just pay me the 5, that would be $50,000. Now, if I take it out for income, it's tax-free. If I leave it there, it compounds tax-free. Now I've got $1,050,000 growing the next year. But let's say I feel bullish about America this year. Now, I'll use an example. In 2011, November, I felt bullish about America. Any idea why? It was an election year. What was different about that election year? An incumbent was running for a second term, Obama. And I have found that in history, anytime, Republican or Democrat, an incumbent is running for office for their second term, they will do all kinds of things to stimulate the economy so they'll get reelected. So I linked. With indexed universal life, I am linking to an index or indices, I can diversify, of my choice. Back then, I linked to the S&P 500. So an index is a measuring tape, okay? So you're measuring usually 1 year point to point. November 15th of 2011, I linked to the S&P 500. A year later, November 15th, 2012, right after the election, we measure the growth in the S&P 500 during that time period. Sure enough, it grew more than even 16% during that time period. But when you link, this is what you're doing. You're telling the insurance company, I want to link to the S&P or the Dow Jones or the Russell 2000 or the Barclays. Many insurance companies have 10 or 15 indices you can choose from. I could actually say, take 200,000 and link it to the Dow, 200,000 to the Barclays, 200,000 to the Russell, 200,000 to the S&P, and leave the last 200,000 in there earning 5%. I can diversify like crazy with this thing. but I want to keep it simple. So with the S&P, what I'm doing is I'm telling the insurance company, don't risk my million. My $1 million must stay safe in your insurance company earning 5, but I want you to pay me whatever the S&P does. How can they do that? You can't believe how many people ask the question, how can an insurance company afford to pay you 16% in that year when they're only earning 5? Are you ready for the answer? What I'm telling the insurance company is, I'm willing to relinquish the for sure 5. Don't mess around with my $1 million. Leave it there safe, earning 5, but I'm willing to give up this $50,000 or for sure 5%. You can do whatever you want with that interest to have the wherewithal to pay me whatever the index does that I chose. So let's say the S&P went up 10%. That $50,000, the insurance company is smart. They buy upside options in the S&P 500. They do this hourly. They're the #1 purchaser of options in the world. And so they have 50,000 of options that if the S&P doubles, that 50,000 grows by 100 grand, and they can pay me $100,000 or 10% that year if that's what it did. But do you know, in 2012, it actually was in excess of 16%, but they have to cap you. I actually earned $160,000 from 2011 to 2012 on the $1 million, 16% return, okay? And people say, how can they afford to pay you 16 when they're only earning 5? It's because with options, the 50,000 of options and the price of those allows them to be able to have 50 grow by 160 grand. They wouldn't do it if they didn't have the wherewithal. What's the trade-off? The S&P actually was higher than that, but they capped it at 16 because they don't have my whole $1 million to put at risk. My principal must stay safe in the insurance company. And so since they only have the interest on my $1 million to buy options, they have to cap me. But the benefit is 0. If I guessed wrong and there was a terrorist attack in 2012, my $1 million still would have been worth $1 million. If a 2001 type of experience happened when the World Trade Centers went down and in 3 years the economy went down 40%, if I had my money in a variable universal life or in the market, my $1 million would have only been worth $600,000. That's what happened in 2008. In 2008, I did not lose a dime of my money in there. I did not make anything. 0 was my hero because I didn't lose. I didn't make anything, but I didn't lose. In the first 90 days of 2009, I locked in, gained 16% the first 90 days after not losing a penny the year before. Do you know most Americans had to wait 4 years from 2008 to 2012 to make back the 400 grand they lost? Not me. By the end of 2012 with indexing, $1 million that I had in the year 2000 was worth $3 million in 12 years. Everybody else in America, their $1 million dropped down 40% twice, and it took 12 years to get back what they had lost. You can have far more money by using indexing because your money is not at risk in the market. Only the interest on your money buys options. If the market goes down, the options expire worthless. But you simply gave up the for sure 5. You did not lose your principal. And I have discovered that throughout history, if I link to an index, because most decades, you'll have 7 gain years versus 3 loss years. That decade, 2000 to 2010, and another 2 years to 2012, we had 5 loss years. Okay, that means you would have earned 0, was your hero, 5 years. You only made money the other 5 or 7 years. I only capped out twice, but my average return from 2000 to 2010 was 7.23%. $1 million doubled to $2 million. But because I used indexing and I rebalanced, which I'll talk about in another episode, I only earned 0 in 2001 and 2008. Because I moved back over and earned 5% when the economy went to heck in a handbasket. You don't have to sit there and earn 0 for 2 and 3 years in a row. You just move back over and say, okay, just give me the for sure 5 next year. And then when you're ready to link, you link and you can participate in the upside without the risk of losing if the market goes down. So the key takeaway to this episode is that with indexed universal life, your money is safe in the insurance company earning the general account portfolio rate, whether it's 4%, 5%, 6%. Back in the 1980s, I was earning 11 to 15%. But anytime you want to link to an index, you can do that. And now you participate with the upside, but only the interest on your principal did you relinquish or you put at risk. The principal stays safe, so that if the market goes down, you don't lose. You earn zero. You may not earn anything, but zero can be your hero.